My daughter said I'm the reason her dad left, so I left her too. I was making coffee to help me stay awake after my 18-hour shift when my 14-year-old daughter Ariana strolled into the kitchen, wearing a skirt that barely reached her thighs. "Mom," she slurred, "I'm going to Allison's party. I'll get a taxi home at 5 a.m. "You're not going to an unsupervised party," I responded. Her face twisted like I just slapped her. "Amelia's mom trusts her. You're so controlling and paranoid. No wonder you have no friends. I'm trying to keep you safe." She slammed her phone on the counter so hard my coffee splashed. "You know what Allison's mom told me? Her mom said you're the reason Dad left, that you're impossible to live with." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but she cut me off, stepping closer with tears of rage in her eyes. "At least Dad had the sense to leave." Her voice cracked with venom. "I wish you would leave too." "Okay," I said quietly. "You got it." "Whatever, Mom. I'm going anyway." My daughter wanted me gone. She was about to learn what gone really meant. You see, I'd heard this song before. Every rule, every boundary I set, my daughter called me the worst mom in existence. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way she looked at me with pure disgust, or maybe I was just too tired to keep absorbing the hits. My daughter didn't know about the $47,000 my ex drained from our savings, about the broken ribs that happened from falling downstairs, the nights I spent changing locks while Ariana slept. But I'd kept that story buried for 16 years, letting her believe her father was just a man who needed space. The first 3 days of me gone were her victory lap. She posted everything, the parties, the 3 a.m. returns, the older boys. Her stories screamed freedom. I watched from my phone during breaks at work, seeing my daughter live the life she thought she wanted. No paranoid mom tracking her location. No texts asking where she was. Her friends commented how cool she'd become overnight. By day 4, the dishes had piled up. I'd always done them before my morning shift, but now I left before dawn and came home after midnight. At 4 a.m., she texted me about her volleyball uniform. "I need my uniform cleaned by 7 a.m. Don't forget, please." I didn't reply and just left a note on the washing machine. "Machines available." In response, she spam called me when I was at work. With each voicemail, her voice got smaller and smaller. Then, "Mom, I don't know how to separate colors. Can you just come home?" But I was giving her what she wanted, a mom who'd left, just like Dad. Week 2, reality hit hard. Turns out I'd been managing her entire life without her knowing. School program application deadlines? I had them in my calendar. Permission slips? I'd sign them at 6 a.m. before work. Now, with me gone from 5 a.m. to midnight every day, her world started falling apart. After all, Ariana wanted space from her controlling mother. "Where are you?" she texted on day 10. "I'm taking a break from my paranoia to give you space," I replied. "Like you wanted. Like Dad did." The typing bubbles appeared and disappeared for 5 minutes. Nothing sent. Week 3 was when she broke. It was a Friday night and her friend's party got busted. I could barely hear her whispering when she called. Police sirens filled the background and there were kids crying. "Mom, I'm hiding upstairs. Please come get me." My maternal instinct went into overdrive, but I swallowed it. "Call your dad," I said, my heart shattering. "You said he was the smart one for leaving." Beep. She hung up. I didn't know it at the time, but she actually called him after that. Found his phone number on Facebook. His profile picture showed him at a casino, eyes bloodshot, that same angry smile that used to make me lock myself in the bathroom. "Dad? It's Ariana. I'm at a party and the cops are here and I'm scared and Mom won't come get me." She could hear a TV in the background, followed by some woman asking who was calling. Then a crash, like a bottle hitting a wall. "Why are you calling me?" His voice was exactly like she remembered from the few birthday calls over the years. Distant. Annoyed. "Mom said to call you. Please, can you just—" "I'm in Vegas, kid. And you're practically an adult. Handle it." "But Dad, I need—" "Your mother's had you for 14 years. One party goes bad and suddenly I'm supposed to drop everything? She wanted full custody, this is her problem. Dad, please." He hung up. Blocked her number before she could text. That's how I found her at 5 a.m., curled up on the kitchen floor wearing my old apron, the one she always said was embarrassing. She looked up when I walked in, eyes swollen from crying. "I was wrong," she whispered. "You're not the reason Dad left. You're the reason I survived him leaving." Her whole body shook as she stood up. "I don't need a dad who left. I need the mom who stayed. Please," she grabbed my hands. "Be my mom again. You're all I have. You're all I've ever had." That's when her phone buzzed. She pulled back, confused, checking the screen. "Mom." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Dad's texting me." She turned the phone toward me, hands shaking. Then she said 5 words that stopped my heart. "Dad's outside. He wants custody." I looked through the blinds. He was in the same truck, sitting the same way he sat in it 16 years ago. Engine running, waiting for me to brake. I stand frozen at the window watching his truck idle in the darkness, my hands shaking as Ariana grips my arm with a need I haven't felt from her in years. The engine rumbles like a threat, and I know from experience that he's waiting to see if I'll crack first, if fear will make me stupid. I pull Ariana away from the window and grab my phone, my mind racing through 16 years of survival skills I thought I'd left behind. My fingers move fast, locking the front door deadbolt and checking it twice. then the chain lock, then testing the handle to make sure it holds. Ariana follows me room to room as I move through the house, her earlier attitude completely gone as she watches me check every window lock. We pile the kitchen table and 2 chairs against the back door because the lock is old and I don't trust it, and I show Ariana how to barricade herself in the bathroom if someone gets inside. My hands are steady now because I've done this before, and the muscle memory of survival kicks in, even though my heart is pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. I sit Ariana down at the kitchen table after we move it back and we set up rules for right now, this moment, this crisis that she invited into our lives without understanding what she was doing. No opening any door for any reason, phones charged and on loud, stay away from windows, and if his truck is still there in 20 minutes, we call the police. She nods at everything I say, her face pale and young, finally looking like the 14-year-old child she actually is instead of the grown woman she's been pretending to be. Her phone buzzes on the table between us and we both jump. She picks it up with shaking hands and turns the screen toward me. It's a text from him with a screenshot of custody law websites and a message about parental rights and unfit mothers who abandon their children, and I feel the old sick feeling of his games. But this time, I don't delete it in shame or panic. I grab my phone and screenshot everything and save it to 3 different places: my photos and my email and the cloud. Ariana watches me work through each message, saving and organizing, and I see her start to understand that surviving him takes planning, not just feelings. I open my phone and dial the non-emergency police line because 911 is for active crimes and he's just sitting in a truck on a public street. But I need this written down even if they can't do much. The woman who answers is kind but clear about what the police can and can't do, explaining that unless he gets out of the truck or makes real threats, their hands are tied by laws that protect him more than us. She sends a patrol car anyway to make a record of it, and I feel the small relief of having something official start to build, a paper trail that might matter later. I keep checking the window every few minutes while we wait, seeing his truck still sitting there with the engine running, and I wonder what he's thinking, what he's planning, if he'll actually try something tonight. 15 minutes later, I see the police car turn onto our street with its lights off, and his truck pulls away before the officer even parks. The officer knocks on our door and I check through the window first before opening it, and he introduces himself as Officer Colombo and asks to come inside. He's calm and professional as he takes our statement while keeping an eye on the street through our front window, writing down everything we tell him about the texts and the truck and the years we've been apart. He explains that my ex left when the patrol car showed up, but that this kind of scary behavior often continues, and we should write down everything with photos, times, and screenshots. He gives me an incident report number and his card, and suggests I file for a restraining order first thing Monday morning, because weekend judges are harder to reach. Before he leaves, Officer Colombo walks me through safety planning basics, talking about code words with Ariana for danger, neighbors we can trust to call 911 if we can't, and keeping a bag packed in case we need to leave fast. He's matter-of-fact about it in a way that makes it feel less like I'm crazy, and more like smart planning, and I realize this is what having help feels like. Ariana listens to every word with wide eyes, and I can see her romantic ideas about her father breaking apart as she understands what kind of man needs this level of safety planning. After Officer Colombo drives away, I triple-check all the locks again, and we settle in to wait. The truck doesn't come back that night, but the texts keep coming every 30 minutes until I finally block his number at 3 a.m., my hands shaking with anger more than fear now. Ariana is asleep on the couch because she's too scared to be in her room alone, and I sit in the dark kitchen drinking cold coffee and making lists of everything I need to do when Monday comes. The blocked number feels like a tiny win. One small line I can draw even though I know he'll find other ways to reach us. I watch the sun come up through the kitchen window, my body tired but my mind too wired to sleep, and I think about how fast everything changed. How one phone call from Ariana brought 16 years of running right back to our door. Morning comes too fast and I have to figure out how to do normal life on top of crisis mode. Calling Ariana's school to explain she'll be late. Texting my boss about needing Monday afternoon off for legal stuff and making breakfast like we're not both running on no sleep and pure fear. We set up new rules over cereal, me driving her to and from the school until this is over. No social media posts about where we are, and her promise to text me every hour she's not in class. She agrees to everything without fighting, and I see how badly the party and his rejection broke something in her that my rules never could. At work, I can barely focus on my tasks, checking my phone every few minutes to make sure Ariana texted like she promised. On my lunch break, I sit in my car and call the domestic violence hotline that Officer Colombo wrote on the back of his card, my voice shaking as I explain that I left my abuser 16 years ago, but he's back now. The woman on the phone doesn't judge me for the time gap, or for the mistakes I made letting Ariana push limits. She just sets up a safety planning meeting for tomorrow, and asks if I'm safe right now. Hearing someone ask that question with real concern makes me cry in my car in the work parking lot, and I realize how long it's been since anyone asked if I was okay, how many years I've spent just surviving without anyone noticing. I drive home from work with my eyes still red from crying, and find Ariana waiting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of tea already made. She pushes one toward me and starts talking before I can even sit down, her words tumbling out fast like she's been holding them in all day. She tells me about the party and how she felt so grown up walking in with her short skirt and her friends taking photos, how the music was loud and there were older kids drinking and she felt like she finally belonged somewhere. Then the cops showed up, and suddenly everyone was running and screaming, and she was just a scared kid hiding in a stranger's bathroom with her heart pounding, listening to people get arrested downstairs. She describes calling her dad with so much hope in her voice, really believing he would drop everything and come save her because that's what parents do when their kids are in trouble. The way his voice sounded distant and annoyed cut through her like a knife, and when he said she was practically an adult and should handle it herself, she felt like someone punched her in the stomach and knocked all the air out. I hold her while she cries and tell her what I should have told her years ago, that his leaving had nothing to do with her being good enough or worthy of love. I explain that he was broken in ways we couldn't fix, that some people are just damaged, and they hurt everyone around them no matter how much you try to make them better. She asks why I never told her the truth, and I say I was trying to protect her from knowing her dad was the kind of man who would rather gamble in Vegas than help his own daughter, but maybe that was the wrong choice. We sit there for a long time with her head on my shoulder, and I stroke her hair like I used to. When she was little and something shifts between us that feels like the start of real honesty, instead of the lies I've been telling to keep the peace. After she stops crying, we clear the table and get out paper and pens to make a real safety plan together. Not just rules, but actual steps for what to do if he shows up. We write down code words for different levels of danger, like pineapple means end this situation right now, and umbrella means call 911 without being obvious about it. Ariana suggests we tell our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, that we might need her to call the police sometimes if she sees his truck or hears yelling. And I'm surprised by how practical her thinking is until I remember she's my daughter, and survival runs in our blood whether we want it to or not. We list out what to do if he shows up at her school, at my work, at the grocery store, at her friend's house, covering every scenario we can think of like we're planning for a war. She writes down the address of her school and my work building, and we practice the plan like a fire drill, with her pretending to be at the school when he shows up, and me coaching her through using the code word with a teacher. It feels both ridiculous and necessary at the same time. This choreography of escape we're learning together like a dance nobody wants to know. We tape the plan to the inside of her closet door where she can see it but visitors can't, and we both take photos of it on our phones in case we need it when we're not home. By the time we finish, it's almost midnight and we're both exhausted, but I feel like we actually did something useful instead of just being scared. Monday morning, I wake up early and call the hospital where I gave birth to Ariana, asking for the medical records department with my voice steady even though my hands are shaking. I list the dates I remember going to the emergency room with accidents. The broken ribs in March 2008, the concussion in July 2007, the sprained wrist in November 2006. All the injuries I explained away with lies about falling downstairs or walking into doors. The records clerk asks if I need them for legal purposes, and I say yes. And there's this long pause before she tells me they'll be ready in 3 business days, with a gentleness in her voice that tells me she knows exactly what kind of accidents I'm talking about. She doesn't ask questions or make me explain, and I'm grateful for that small mercy. For not having to say out loud that my ex-husband broke my ribs while I was 6 months pregnant. I give her my email and phone number, and she promises to call. When the records are ready for pickup, and I add this task to my growing list of evidence, feeling like I'm building a case against a ghost that suddenly becomes solid and dangerous again. The whole call takes less than 10 minutes, but I'm sweating by the end of it, my heart racing like I just ran a mile. Because requesting these records makes everything real in a way it hasn't been for 16 years. That evening, Ariana sits at the kitchen table with a notebook and starts writing her own timeline of every interaction she can remember with her dad over the years. She writes down the birthday calls that came late or not at all, the promises to visit for Christmas that never happened, the way he always had an excuse about work or money or his new girlfriend not wanting him to travel. Her handwriting gets messier as she goes, and I can see tears dropping onto the paper, making the ink blur in spots. But she keeps writing like she needs to get it all out. She shows me her list when she's done and asks why she couldn't see it before. Why she spent years thinking he was just busy instead of realizing he simply didn't care enough to make her a priority. I tell her that children are wired to love their parents even when those parents don't deserve it, that her brain was protecting her from a truth that would hurt too much to accept. She nods and wipes her eyes and adds her timeline to the folder with my medical records and the screenshots of his threatening texts. Another piece of the story we're building to protect ourselves from him. We have this weird moment where we're both looking at all this evidence of our separate pain and realizing we've been fighting the same man in different ways for her entire life. I spend the next hour programming the non-emergency police number into both our phones and saving Officer Colombo's direct line under the name Emergency Dimitri so we can reach him fast if we need help. We test calling the number to make sure it works, and I save the incident report number from Friday night in 3 different places, in my phone notes, in my email drafts, and on a piece of paper taped inside my wallet. Ariana watches me do all this and asks why I'm being so careful about keeping track of everything, and I explain that losing track of details could cost us everything in court because judges need proof, not just stories. This kind of organization feels like control when everything else feels like chaos spinning out of reach, and I teach Ariana that documentation is how we fight back when we can't fight with our fists or our voices. She takes notes on her own phone about how to save evidence and asks smart questions about what matters in court and what doesn't. And I realize she's learning survival skills that no 14-year-old should need to know. Tuesday afternoon, I take a long lunch break and drive to the courthouse downtown, finding the family court clerk's office after getting lost twice in the maze of hallways. I fill out forms for a temporary restraining order while sitting in a plastic chair surrounded by other people's misery, women with black eyes and men with angry faces, and kids who look too tired for their age. The forms ask me to describe the abuse in clinical detail, and I write about the broken ribs, and the financial control, and the night he sat outside our house in his truck, trying to make 16 years of terror fit into little boxes on government paperwork. The clerk reviews what I wrote and schedules an emergency hearing for Thursday morning, explaining that if the judge grants the temporary order, my ex will be served by the sheriff, and we'll have a full hearing in 2 weeks to make it permanent. I walk out with a case number written on a yellow slip of paper and a court date that feels both too soon and not soon enough. Like I've set something in motion that I can't take back even if I wanted to. The fear of his anger when he gets served mixes with relief that I'm finally fighting back instead of just hiding, and I sit in my car for 10 minutes before I can drive back to work because my hands won't stop shaking. Wednesday morning, my supervisor calls while I'm getting ready for work and asks if I can cover a double shift this weekend because someone called in sick. I have to say no for the first time in 3 years, and the word feels strange in my mouth, like I'm breaking some unspoken rule about always being available. I explain that I have court on Thursday and need to keep my schedule flexible for legal stuff without giving her all the details, and I can hear the disappointment in her voice because I'm the reliable one who always says yes to extra shifts. She says okay, but her tone is cold and I worry about losing hours when I need money more than ever, when every dollar counts toward keeping the lights on and food in the fridge. The guilt of putting safety before income feels like another kind of failure, like I'm letting everyone down by choosing to protect myself and my daughter instead of being the perfect employee. But I remind myself that being dead or broken won't pay the bills either, that I can't work if I'm in the hospital or worse, and I force myself to believe that this choice is the right one, even though it feels terrible. Thursday morning, I wake up to my phone buzzing with notifications and find that my ex has posted on Facebook about me being an unfit mother who abandoned our daughter for weeks. He tagged mutual friends we haven't spoken to in over a decade, and his post is full of lies about me leaving Ariana alone and choosing work over my child, twisting those 2 weeks into something ugly and false. Ariana shows me her phone where his friends are sending her messages asking if she's okay and if she needs to be rescued from her terrible mother, and I watch her face crumple with shame and anger. We spend an hour locking down her social media and blocking dozens of accounts, changing her privacy settings so only confirmed friends can see her posts or send her messages. I explain that this is what people like him do when they start losing control. They try to destroy your reputation before you can tell the truth about them, turning you into the villain so nobody believes you when you finally speak up. She asks why he would lie like that when he knows the truth, and I tell her that people like him believe their own lies after a while, that they rewrite history to make themselves the victim in every story. Ariana's school counselor pulls her aside after second period because a teacher noticed she seemed upset and distracted during class. Instead of brushing it off like she usually does, Ariana tells her everything about her dad showing up, and the restraining order, and the Facebook posts attacking me, and the counselor takes notes and listens without judging. The counselor calls me at work to ask permission to document the situation and offer Ariana weekly check-ins during lunch period, and I almost cry with thanks that another adult is paying attention and trying to help. She explains that the school can note any custody concerns in their records and provide statements to the court if needed, and I realize we're building an army of people who see the truth, even though I've spent years fighting alone. I give permission for everything and ask the counselor to please watch out for my daughter because I can't be there during school hours, and she promises to keep Ariana safe and let me know if anything concerning happens. I use my afternoon break to go to the police station and request copies of the report from Friday night when Officer Colombo came to our house, filling out another form and paying another fee to add to my growing folder of evidence. Officer Colombo sees me in the lobby waiting for the copies and asks how we're doing, his face kind and concerned in a way that makes me feel less alone. I show him the Facebook posts and the messages Ariana received, and he suggests I document everything for a possible harassment claim, explaining that this kind of campaign to destroy someone's reputation can be evidence of continued abuse. He tells me that these digital breadcrumbs matter in court, that judges pay attention to patterns of behavior over time, and I feel less crazy for saving every screenshot and writing down every detail with dates and times. When the clerk brings me the police report, I thank Officer Colombo for everything he's done. And he just nods and says that's what he's here for, and I walk out feeling like maybe the system might actually work for us this time, instead of against us. Friday afternoon, I'm sorting inventory in the back room when someone calls my name from the front, and I walk out to find a man in a polo shirt holding a manila envelope. He asks if I'm me, and when I nod, he hands me the envelope and says I've been served, then walks out before I can ask what it means. My hands shake as I tear it open and pull out a stack of legal papers, the words swimming as I try to make sense of custody motion, and family court and respondent, and then I see my ex's name as petitioner, and my stomach drops. The document describes the 2 weeks I gave Ariana space as willful abandonment of a minor child, and claims I'm mentally unstable and unfit to parent, and every word is a lie wrapped in legal language that makes it sound true. The papers demand immediate custody transfer and suggest I'm a danger to our daughter, listing dates and times that sound official, but twist everything into something ugly and wrong. I read it 3 times in the break room with my supervisor asking if I'm okay, and I can't even answer because the injustice is choking me. My break ends, but I take the papers to my car and sit in the parking lot calling the domestic violence advocate with my hands still shaking. She answers on the third ring, and I try to explain about the custody motion, but my voice keeps cracking, so I just read parts of it out loud, until she stops me and says she understands. She tells me she can get me an emergency appointment with a legal aid attorney for Monday morning, and I almost cry with relief that someone is taking this seriously. The advocate explains I qualify for free representation based on my income and the domestic violence history, and that my case is urgent enough to jump the line ahead of other people waiting. I feel guilty for being grateful that my crisis is bad enough to matter, but I swallow that feeling and write down the appointment time and address. She warns me that legal aid usually has long waits, but they prioritize cases involving custody and abuse, and I should bring every piece of evidence I've collected. I spend the rest of my shift in a fog, and when I get home that night, Ariana asks what's wrong, and I show her the papers. She reads them with her mouth getting smaller and smaller, and then she looks up and asks why he would lie like that when he knows the truth. I tell her that people like him believe their own lies after a while, that they rewrite history to make themselves the victim in every story, and she nods like she's starting to understand how his mind works. The weekend crawls by while I obsessively read the custody papers over and over, making notes in the margins about which parts are lies and which parts are twisted versions of truth. I try to prepare for a fight I don't understand against someone who's always been better at lying than I am at telling the truth. Saturday morning, I spread everything across the kitchen table and organize it by date: the police reports and medical records and screenshots, and the CPS report that found no concerns. Ariana helps me make copies of everything, and we put the originals in a folder and the copies in a backup folder that we hide in different places. I read legal websites trying to understand custody law and parental rights and what judges care about, but the language is confusing and contradictory, and I keep thinking I'm missing something important. Sunday night, I can't sleep, so I write out my own timeline of the 2 weeks I worked late, listing every shift and every bill I paid and every time I checked on Ariana, even from a distance. The timeline proves I never abandoned her, but I don't know if a judge will see it that way, or if they'll believe his version where I'm a neglectful mother who disappeared. I practice explaining it out loud in the bathroom mirror, but every version sounds defensive or weak or like I'm making excuses, and I'm terrified of standing in front of a judge and having my words twisted into something I didn't mean. Monday morning, I drive to the legal aid office in a part of town I don't usually visit, past pawn shops and check cashing places and a clinic with bars on the windows. The office is on the second floor of a building that smells like old coffee and desperation, and the waiting room has plastic chairs and outdated magazines and a receptionist behind bulletproof glass. I give my name and sit down clutching my evidence folder and trying not to think about how many other people need help in this same room. After 20 minutes, a woman comes out and calls my name, and I follow her down a narrow hallway to a cramped office with a desk covered in case files. She introduces herself as Lavinia Allard and shakes my hand with a firm grip that feels competent and sure. I hand her my evidence folder, and she starts flipping through it with quick, efficient movements, and then she looks up at me with the first genuine smile I've seen in weeks. Lavinia explains that custody cases involving domestic violence have specific protections, and that judges take abuse history seriously when making decisions about kids. She's blunt about the likely outcomes: supervised visitation for him at best, maybe limited custody if I mess up my testimony, and I appreciate her honesty even though it makes me want to throw up. She tells me the 2 weeks I stepped back will definitely be used against me, and I need to be prepared to explain my reasoning without sounding like I was punishing my daughter. I nod and grip the arms of my chair and try to absorb everything she's saying about court procedures and evidence rules and how family court works. Lavinia asks me directly about the 2 weeks I was gone, and I tell her the truth: that I was working 18-hour shifts and sleeping at work, that I was giving my daughter the space she demanded while still paying all the bills and keeping the house running. I explain about the fight and Ariana saying she wished I would leave and how I took her literally because I was too tired to keep absorbing her anger. Lavinia listens without interrupting and takes notes, and when I finish, she nods like it makes sense. She says we'll frame it as maintaining boundaries while ensuring safety rather than abandonment, and that boundary setting is actually good parenting, even when it looks harsh from the outside. She coaches me on how to talk about it in court without sounding defensive, practicing phrases like I continued providing financially and emotionally while giving her the independence she requested. We go over the evidence piece by piece, and she highlights the parts that matter most: the police report from when he sat outside our house, the medical records from years ago, the school counselor's statement. Lavinia warns me that his lawyer will twist everything I say and try to make me look unstable or vindictive, but that the truth told calmly is more powerful than his lies told with rage. She makes me practice answering hostile questions until I can stay steady, even when I want to cry or scream. By the time I leave her office 2 hours later, I feel like I have a strategy instead of just panic, and that small shift makes all the difference. That evening, Ariana and I sit at the kitchen table and practice telling our story together, figuring out how to explain the fight and the party and the phone call without making either of us look terrible. We write out a timeline that's honest about both our mistakes, her pushing boundaries and me pulling back too far, but shows how we came back together when it mattered. Ariana practices what she'll say if the judge asks her questions, keeping it simple and truthful without blaming anyone. We agree that honesty is our only weapon because his lies will eventually contradict themselves, but our truth will stay consistent because it actually happened. She squeezes my hand across the table and says she'll tell the judge that I never abandoned her, that I was always working to keep us safe even when she couldn't see it. I look at my daughter sitting there with her jaw set and her eyes clear, and I realize she's grown up more in 2 weeks than in the previous 14 years. We practice until we can tell the story without crying or getting angry, until it sounds like facts instead of emotions. And then we put the notes away and make dinner together like this is just a normal Monday night. Tuesday morning, the emergency restraining order hearing happens in a small courtroom that smells like floor polish and stress. Lavinia meets me outside and we go over the plan one more time, her voice calm and professional while my hands shake holding the evidence folder. The judge is a woman in her 50s with reading glasses and a tired expression, and she listens while Lavinia presents our case, and his lawyer argues that I'm overreacting to a concerned father. I watch the judge read through the police report and the threatening texts and my medical records from years ago, her face giving nothing away. She asks me directly if I fear for my safety, and I say yes without hesitation, because it's the truth, and Lavinia taught me that simple truth is powerful. The judge reviews the doorbell camera footage of his truck idling outside our house and the text demanding custody, and then she grants a temporary restraining order effective immediately. The order prohibits him from coming within 500 feet of our home or Ariana's school. But Lavinia warned me this would happen, so I'm not surprised when the judge adds that supervised visitation is still allowed pending the full custody hearing because courts favor parental contact. I feel both protected and exposed sitting there in the courtroom, grateful for the boundary, but scared that it's not enough to actually stop him if he decides to ignore it. His lawyer argues that supervised visitation is unnecessary and extreme, but the judge cuts him off and says the order stands until the full hearing in 2 weeks. We walk out of the courthouse and Lavinia tells me this is a good outcome, that temporary orders often become permanent if the evidence supports it, and I try to believe her even though my stomach is still twisted in knots. Wednesday evening, I'm making dinner when I see his truck drive slowly past our house through the kitchen window. My hands freeze on the knife I'm using to cut vegetables, and I grab my phone and pull up the doorbell camera app that Lavinia told me to install with money I couldn't afford to spend. The camera caught everything, his truck cruising by at maybe 10 miles an hour, him clearly visible in the driver's seat staring at our house. I download the footage with shaking hands and send it to Officer Colombo and Lavinia with a message that says he just violated the restraining order. Officer Colombo responds within 5 minutes asking if I'm safe right now and if I want to file a report, and I tell him yes to both. Lavinia texts back that she's forwarding the footage to the prosecutor and that violations this soon after the order are taken seriously by judges. Within an hour, a patrol car is parked on our street as a deterrent, and Officer Colombo comes to the door to take my statement. Ariana watches from her bedroom window with her phone in her hand, ready to call 911, and I see her practicing the agency that I'm learning myself, the knowledge that we can ask for help, and sometimes people actually come. Officer Colombo stays for 20 minutes making sure we feel safe and explaining that the violation will be added to the case file for the full custody hearing. After he leaves, I check all the locks twice and pull the curtains closed and try to convince myself that a piece of paper and a patrol car are enough to keep us safe. Thursday night, Ariana is doing homework at the kitchen table when her phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. She picks it up and her face goes pale, and she shows me the screen where a message says he just wants to talk and asks if she's really afraid of him. The number isn't one we've blocked before, so clearly her father is trying to get around the blocked contact using a different phone. I watch her stare at the message with her thumb hovering over the reply button, and I don't tell her what to do. I just sit down next to her and remind her of the code words we practiced. I ask her what she thinks he wants from this conversation, and she's quiet for a long time before saying he wants her to feel guilty for protecting herself. She deletes the message without responding and blocks the new number, and I'm so proud of her I could cry. This small act of choosing safety over the fantasy of reconciliation that kids always hope for with absent parents. We add the screenshot to our evidence folder, and I send it to Lavinia, who responds that this kind of contact violation strengthens our case. Ariana goes back to her homework like nothing happened, but I see her hands shaking a little, and I know this cost her something, even though it was the right choice. Friday night, I sit down to pay bills, and the math doesn't work anymore. I've lost a full week of overtime because of court dates and lawyer meetings, and the numbers in my bank account are smaller than the numbers on the bills spread across the table. I stare at them trying to figure out what we can delay, whether the electric company will accept a partial payment, if we can survive on rice and beans for a few weeks until I catch up. The rent is due in 5 days, and I'm short by $200 even after paying everything else late. The financial abuse is hitting me all over again. The way his chaos costs me money and stability. The way his need for control reaches into my bank account even though he's been gone for 16 years. I hate him for making me choose between safety and keeping the lights on, for turning my life into a constant calculation of what I can afford to lose. I pull out my credit card that I swore I'd never use except for emergencies, and add the shortfall to the balance that's already too high. The interest will kill me eventually, but right now I just need to make it through this month and the next court date, and maybe the victim assistance funds will come through before everything falls apart. I put the bills away and sit in the dark kitchen trying not to think about how many more months of this I can survive. Lavinia calls Saturday morning and says we should apply for victim assistance funds through the state, that they can cover things like security systems and moving costs and legal fees for domestic violence survivors. She emails me the application, and I print it out and start filling in the boxes with details about the abuse that I have to relive in bureaucratic language. The form asks for dates and descriptions and supporting documentation, and I attach copies of the medical records and police reports and the restraining order. Each question makes me write out another piece of the nightmare, the broken ribs and the drained bank account, and the nights I spent changing locks while pregnant and terrified. Lavinia promises the funds can make a real difference if approved, that they might cover the doorbell camera and the new locks, and even some of the legal costs that legal aid doesn't handle. I fill out every line carefully and double-check that I've attached all the required documents, and then I submit it online with a prayer that some government office will see us as worthy of help. The confirmation email says processing takes 4 to 6 weeks, and I try not to think about how many other families are competing for the same limited money, or whether we'll still need it by the time it comes through. The confirmation email says processing takes 4 to 6 weeks, and I try not to think about how many other families are competing for the same limited money, or whether we'll still need it by the time it comes through. Tuesday morning, I'm getting ready for work when someone knocks on the door at 9 a.m., and through the peephole, I see a woman in business casual holding a clipboard and a county ID badge. I open the door and she introduces herself as Rosamond Beck from Child Protective Services, explaining that my ex filed a complaint about neglect and she's required to investigate. My stomach twists because Lavinia warned me this would happen, that he would use every system available to punish me for fighting back. Rosamond asks to come inside and look around the house, and she needs to interview Ariana privately. And I have no choice but to let her in, even though every instinct screams that inviting government workers into your home never ends well for people like us. She walks through each room taking notes while I follow behind, feeling like a criminal in my own house, watching her check the fridge for food and the bathroom for basic supplies, and Ariana's bedroom for safety hazards. She asks about our routines and schedules, about the 2 weeks I worked extended hours, about the restraining order and why it was necessary. I answer every question as honestly as I can without breaking down, explaining that I was always working to support us, that I never abandoned my daughter even when I gave her the space she demanded. Rosamond's face stays neutral and professional, giving me no hint whether she believes me or thinks I'm just another neglectful parent making excuses. She asks if Ariana is home, and I text her to come out of her room, and my daughter appears in the hallway looking nervous and young in her school clothes. Rosamond explains that she needs to talk to Ariana alone for about 30 minutes, and I watch them disappear into Ariana's bedroom and close the door. I sit at the kitchen table trying not to panic, imagining all the ways this interview could go wrong, all the things Ariana might say that could be twisted into evidence against me. The minutes crawl by and I stare at my phone without seeing it, running through every parenting mistake I've made and wondering if they'll be enough to take my daughter away. When they finally come out, Ariana looks tired but calm, and Rosamond thanks us both for our cooperation and says she'll submit her report within a week. After she leaves, Ariana sits next to me and tells me what happened in the interview. She says she was completely honest about everything, about our fights and the party and the 2 weeks I worked late and barely came home. But she also told Rosamond about finding me asleep in my car between shifts because I was too tired to drive, about how there was always food in the house and clean clothes in her closet, about how I never actually abandoned her even when she said horrible things. Rosamond asked about the restraining order, and Ariana explained about her dad showing up and the threatening texts, and how scared we both were that night. She took notes on our safety plan and seemed satisfied that we had systems in place to protect ourselves. Before Rosamond left, she told Ariana that she's seen real abandonment and neglect in her job, and this situation doesn't match those patterns at all. The school calls Wednesday afternoon to tell me that Ariana's counselor wants to set up a 504 plan to help her manage the stress that's affecting her schoolwork. The counselor explains that the plan will include permission for Ariana to text me during the day if she's feeling overwhelmed, and access to a quiet room where she can take breaks when the classroom feels too intense. Thursday evening, the paperwork arrives home in a manila envelope, and I read through the accommodations with relief that someone in the system is actually trying to help instead of hurt. I sign every page and tell Ariana that asking for support isn't weakness, that learning to recognize when you need help is one of the most important survival skills. She admits she's been having nightmares about her dad showing up at the school, dreams where he's waiting in the parking lot or standing in the hallway outside her classroom. I promise her that the restraining order means the school will call the police if he comes anywhere near campus, that all her teachers know to watch for him. She nods, but I can see in her eyes that she doesn't fully believe promises can keep her safe, and I don't blame her because I learned that lesson years before she was born. The nightmares get worse over the weekend, waking her up crying at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., and by Monday morning she's exhausted and jumpy. I drop her at the school at 7:30 a.m. and go to work, and at 10:15 a.m. I get a call from the school nurse saying Ariana had a panic attack in third period. The nurse explains that Ariana was sitting in English class when she suddenly couldn't breathe, hyperventilating so badly that her teacher sent her to the bathroom with a friend. A teacher found her on the floor gasping for air and shaking, and they brought her to the nurse's office to calm down. I tell my supervisor I have to leave for a family emergency, and I don't wait for permission. Just grab my keys and drive 15 miles over the speed limit to get to her school. I find Ariana in the nurse's office wrapped in a blanket, her face blotchy from crying and her hands still trembling. I sit next to her and pull her against my chest and hold her while her breathing slowly returns to normal, and I don't care that I'm missing work or that my supervisor is probably mad. My phone buzzes with a text asking where I am, and I reply that my daughter had a medical emergency, and I try not to think about whether this will cost me the hours I desperately need. Right now, the only thing that matters is the child in my arms who's learning that trauma doesn't end just because the immediate danger passes. Lavinia calls Tuesday morning to say she's filing our response to the custody motion, and she asks me to come to her office to review everything before it goes to the court. I take a late lunch break and drive to her cramped office where she has our evidence spread across her desk in organized piles. She shows me the statements she collected from Officer Colombo about the night my ex showed up and all the subsequent restraining order violations. She has the school counselor's letter documenting Ariana's anxiety and the accommodations needed to help her feel safe. She has the CPS report that found no concerns about neglect, stating clearly that I've been working hard to provide for my daughter under difficult circumstances. She's attached photos from the doorbell camera showing his truck driving past our house in violation of the court order, with timestamps proving it happened multiple times. She even has my medical records from 16 years ago, documenting the broken ribs and bruises, and the ER visits where I claimed I fell downstairs. I watch her assemble all these pieces into a comprehensive response that tells our story through official documentation, and for the first time, I let myself believe the system might actually work for us instead of against us. She explains that this amount of evidence is unusual in custody cases, that most mothers don't have this level of documentation, and that it makes our case significantly stronger. His lawyer sends a letter the following week offering to drop the entire custody case if I agree to unsupervised visitation every other weekend. Lavinia calls me at work to discuss the offer, and she's clear that this is a trap designed to make me look unreasonable when I refuse. She explains that his sudden willingness to negotiate means he knows his case is weak, that he's trying to get something rather than risk losing everything in court. But she also warns that we can't appear to be completely blocking his relationship with Ariana without good cause, that courts favor parental contact even in abuse cases. We draft a counteroffer proposing supervised visitation only at a licensed facility, with him responsible for paying the supervisor's fees. I feel like I'm playing a game where I don't understand the rules, trusting Lavinia to see the strategic moves that I can't anticipate. She promises this counteroffer protects Ariana, while showing the court we're willing to facilitate some contact, and I sign the letter, hoping she's right. I decide to tell Hattie the truth about everything that's been happening, catching her in the break room during our lunch shift on Thursday. I sit across from her at the plastic table and explain the basics without diving into all the horrible details, telling her about my ex showing up and the custody fight and why I've been so unreliable with my schedule lately. She doesn't ask invasive questions or make me justify my choices. She just listens and nods and offers to cover my shifts whenever I have court dates. She tells me her sister went through something similar a few years ago, and that simple statement of understanding makes me cry harder than any of the legal victories have. I realize I've been so focused on surviving each crisis that I forgot how to accept support from people who actually care. And Hattie's kindness feels like a gift I don't deserve but desperately need. Lavinia takes me to the supervised visitation center on Thursday afternoon for an orientation before Ariana's first visit with her dad. The center is in a depressing strip mall between a tax preparation office and a nail salon, with a faded sign and barred windows that make it look more like a parole office than a place for family bonding. Inside, a coordinator named Caleb walks us through the procedures in a small conference room that smells like old coffee and cleaning products. He explains that visits happen in a monitored room with cameras in every corner and a supervisor sitting in the corner taking notes on everything said and done. Either parent can end the visit early by using a code word, no explanation required, and the supervisor will immediately stop the session. The clinical nature of it feels both safe and heartbreaking. This sterile environment where fathers and daughters are supposed to reconnect under fluorescent lights with a stranger documenting every moment. Caleb shows us the visitation room with its uncomfortable furniture and children's toys that look like they came from a thrift store, and I imagine Ariana sitting in this sad space trying to have a relationship with the man who abandoned her. That night, I sit with Ariana at the kitchen table and ask if she wants to attend the first supervised visit with her dad, making it clear that she has the right to say no, and I'll support whatever she decides. She's quiet for a long time, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve, before saying she thinks she should go at least once. She explains that she needs to see him with clear eyes now that she knows the truth about who he really is, that avoiding him forever will just make him more powerful in her imagination. We talk about what to expect during the visit, and I teach her the code word for ending it early, making her practice saying it out loud until it feels natural. I'm scared of letting her walk into that room even with supervision, but I know that forcing her to avoid him will only give him more control over her thoughts. Saturday morning arrives too fast, and I drive Ariana to the visitation center with my stomach in knots, watching her pick at her fingernails in the passenger seat the way she does when she's nervous. She's wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, nothing fancy, and her face is pale and serious. I walk her inside and Caleb meets us in the lobby, explaining that I'll wait out here during the hour-long visit while he supervises in the room. I watch Ariana disappear through a door marked Visitation Room A, with her shoulders squared like she's preparing for battle, and then I'm alone in the lobby with nothing to do but wait. I sit in an uncomfortable plastic chair and pull out my phone, scrolling through social media without actually seeing any of it, every minute feeling like an hour as I imagine what's happening behind that closed door. I check my phone again, even though only 3 minutes have passed since the last time I looked, and my leg won't stop bouncing against the plastic chair. The lobby is too quiet except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and a clock ticking somewhere behind me, and I keep staring at that door marked Visitation Room A like I can see through it if I focus hard enough. 20 minutes in, I can't take it anymore, and I stand up, walking past the front desk where the receptionist is typing, and I find an angle near the hallway where there's a small observation window with blinds half closed. I know I'm not supposed to look, but I can't help myself. I need to see that she's okay. Through the gaps in the blinds, I catch glimpses of him sitting across from Ariana at a small table. And his voice carries that smooth tone I remember from the early years when he could convince me that breaking dishes was my fault for putting them in the wrong cabinet. He leans forward with his elbows on the table, using that concerned dad voice to ask if she's okay, if I'm treating her well, if she has everything she needs. Caleb sits in the corner with a clipboard taking notes, his face completely neutral like he's seen this performance 100 times before. Ariana's body language is closed off, her arms crossed and her shoulders hunched, and she gives one-word answers without making eye contact. I see him reach across the table like he wants to take her hand, and she pulls back immediately, and I'm so proud of her I could cry right here in this hallway. He tries a different approach, his voice getting softer, saying something about how much he's missed her, and how he wishes things could be different. Then his tone shifts slightly, and I catch words like, your mother, and keeping us apart, and if she really loved you, and I watch Ariana's face go from guarded to angry. She sits up straighter and says something short that makes him lean back, and Caleb writes something on his clipboard. He tries again, this time with the charming smile that used to make my stomach flip before I learned what it really meant. And he talks about wanting to spend more time with her, about how she's getting older and deserves to make her own choices. I see him paint me as the controlling one, the paranoid one, the one who's damaged and unstable, all while wrapping it in fake concern for Ariana's well-being. She's not buying it, and I can see it in the way she keeps her distance, the way she responds in short sentences, the way she looks at the door every few minutes like she's planning her escape route. 40 minutes into the visit, Ariana stands up suddenly and says something, and Caleb immediately closes his notebook and stands up too. The session ends just like that. No argument or discussion, and I rush back to my chair in the lobby before anyone sees me watching. Ariana walks through that door 30 seconds later with her head up and her hands steady, and when she reaches me, she doesn't say anything, just grabs my arm and pulls me toward the exit. We make it to the car before she starts shaking, and I unlock the doors and we both climb in and sit there for a minute in silence. She tells me he spent the whole time trying to convince her that I've messed with her head, that I've turned her against him, that she can't trust her own memories or feelings because I've poisoned her mind. She says she could see exactly what he was doing, like watching someone try to pick a lock when you already know all their tricks, and she kept thinking about the phone call from the party and how he hung up on her. She says it was like watching a magic show after someone explained how the trick works. You can see all the moves and misdirection, but it doesn't fool you anymore. I start the car and drive us home, and she talks the whole way about specific things he said and how she could tell they were manipulation, and I realized that letting her see him was the right choice, even though it scared me. She needed to see him with clear eyes, so she could trust her own judgment, instead of wondering if I was exaggerating or lying about who he really is. Monday morning, I wake up to an email from Caleb with his visit report attached, and I read it 3 times before forwarding it to Lavinia. The report documents everything Ariana told me and more, noting specific attempts by the father to alienate the child from the mother and undermine the child's trust in her own perceptions. Caleb writes in clinical language about the father's manipulation tactics and the child's appropriate use of boundaries to terminate the visit early when she felt uncomfortable. Lavinia calls me 20 minutes later and tells me this kind of documentation is gold in custody cases because it shows his true character when he thinks he's being careful and supervised. She forwards the report to the judge with a cover note highlighting the concerning behavior patterns, and she tells me to save multiple copies in different places. I print 3 copies and put one in our evidence folder, one in my work locker, and one in an envelope I mail to my mom's house just in case something happens to the others. The evidence pile keeps growing and it feels like armor, like each piece of paper is another layer of protection between us and him. Tuesday evening, Lavinia calls me on video and tells me we need to practice for the custody hearing, and for the next 2 hours, she pretends to be his aggressive lawyer asking me horrible questions. She asks why I abandoned my daughter for 2 weeks, why I'm so controlling that I drove my ex away, why I can't just co-parent like a normal person. She makes me answer the same questions 5 different ways until I can stay calm and factual, even when I want to cry or defend myself. And she teaches me that emotion makes me look unstable but steady. Truth makes me look credible. We practice the abandonment questions over and over, with me explaining that I maintained financial support and ensured Ariana's basic needs were met while setting boundaries around her behavior. Lavinia teaches me to frame it as teaching consequences rather than neglect, and to admit I made mistakes in how I handled it, but never stopped being her mother. She warns me that his lawyer will try to make me angry or emotional because that makes me look like the unstable person he claims I am, and she tells me to pause before answering, to take a breath, to stay factual. By the end of the call, my head hurts from concentrating so hard, but I feel more prepared. Like maybe I can survive his lawyer's questions without falling apart. Wednesday night, I sit at the kitchen table with a stack of blank paper and start writing out my sworn statement about the abuse and my hand cramps after the first 2 pages. Lavinia told me it needs to be detailed and chronological so the judge understands the full pattern of behavior, so I start with how he controlled all our money and made me ask permission to buy groceries. I write about the broken ribs that I told the ER came from falling downstairs and the bruises I covered with makeup, and the way he would break things, and then blame me for making him angry. I write about him draining our savings account while I was 8 months pregnant, and the night I changed all the locks after he shoved me into a wall. My eyes blur with tears, but I keep writing because this statement is evidence. It's proof. It's the truth I've kept buried for 16 years. I write about the fear I lived with every day, and the relief I felt when he finally left, and how I've spent 14 years rebuilding a life where Ariana could be safe and happy. When I finish at 2 in the morning, I have 12 pages of single-spaced horror that I'll have to read out loud in court, and I wonder if I'm strong enough to tell this story to strangers who might not believe me. I fold the pages carefully and put them in the evidence folder, and I make copies before I go to bed just in case. Thursday after school, Ariana asks if she needs to write anything for court, and I tell her Lavinia suggested she could write a statement about what she wants regarding visits with her dad. She sits at the kitchen table with a notebook and chews on her pen for a long time before she starts writing, and I leave her alone because this needs to be her words, not mine. An hour later, she shows me 3 pages of careful teenage handwriting, explaining that she wants visits to stay supervised only because she doesn't feel safe alone with him. She writes about the party and calling him for help, and how he hung up on her and chose gambling over his daughter, and she writes about the manipulation she saw during the supervised visit. Her words are simple and honest in a way that hits harder than my detailed statement, and I tell her it's perfect. Lavinia said judges pay special attention to what teenagers want because they're old enough to have real opinions, and I'm grateful that Ariana's voice will be heard, even though I hate that she has to use it this way. She puts her statement in the evidence folder with mine, and we both feel like we're building something solid, something that might actually protect us. Officer Colombo emails me Friday morning to say he's submitting his incident report formally as an exhibit for court, and the attachment includes photos from our doorbell camera showing my ex's truck outside our house. The report documents the night he sat in his truck waiting, and all the times he drove past after the restraining order was issued, and the threatening texts he sent before I blocked his number. Reading it in police language makes it feel more real somehow, like this neutral third party is confirming that yes, this happened, yes, this man is dangerous, yes, these women needed protection. Lavinia adds it to our evidence binder with colored tabs and highlights, and our case looks more official every day, less like my word against his, and more like documented facts that even a skeptical judge can't ignore. The victim assistance funds come through Friday afternoon with a check for $800 to reimburse security expenses and help with safety upgrades, and I cry reading the approval letter. Saturday morning, Ariana and I spend 3 hours installing new deadbolts on all the doors, the kind that can't be kicked in even if someone really tries. I teach her how the mechanisms work, and where we hide the spare keys, and the physical act of making our home more secure feels good in a way that signing paperwork never does. We test each lock multiple times and take photos for our records, and I realize that safety isn't just restraining orders and court hearings, it's also steel and screws and doors that will hold if he tries to break them down. Ariana suggests we install a chain lock on the front door too, and we make another trip to the hardware store and add that to our defenses. By evening, our home feels like a fortress, and my hands hurt from using the drill, but I sleep better that night knowing we've done everything we can to keep ourselves safe. The night before the hearing, I can't sleep, so Ariana and I stay up organizing our evidence binder one more time. We make sure every document is in order, every photo is labeled, every statement is copied and ready. We pack extra copies of everything into a folder in case the originals get lost or damaged, and we lay out our court outfits on the couch. Ariana chose dark jeans and a plain sweater, nothing that looks too young or too grown up, and I'm wearing dress pants and a button-up shirt that makes me look responsible and stable. We practice the deep breathing exercises the domestic violence advocate taught us, counting to 4 on the inhale and 6 on the exhale, and we make a plan for the morning down to what time we'll eat breakfast and when we'll leave the house. This ritual of preparation calms us both, even though we're still scared, and I'm grateful to have her as my partner in this fight, even though she should never have had to learn these survival skills at 14. The courthouse Thursday morning is exactly as scary as I imagined. All marble floors and high ceilings and people in expensive suits who look like they belong here. We see my ex in the hallway with his lawyer, and he tries to catch Ariana's eye, but she stares straight ahead at the wall, and I feel her hand grip mine so tight my fingers go numb. Officer Colombo is standing near the courtroom door, and he gives us a small nod when we walk past, and just knowing he's here as our witness makes me feel less alone. Lavinia meets us at the entrance looking calm and professional in her navy suit, and she puts her hand on my shoulder and tells me we're ready for this. I try to absorb her confidence like it's something I can borrow, and I follow her into the courtroom where our future will be decided. The bailiff calls my name and I walk to the witness stand on legs that feel disconnected from my body, raising my right hand to swear an oath while staring at the wood grain pattern on the judge's bench. Lavinia starts with easy questions about where I work and how long I've been a single parent, her voice calm and professional as she builds the foundation of my story. Then she asks about the marriage, and I tell the truth in simple sentences, describing the first time he grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave bruises, and how the financial control started with him taking my debit card and ended with our savings account emptied. I explain about the broken ribs and the ER visit where I lied to the doctor about falling downstairs, and about the night I changed all the locks while 8 months pregnant because I knew staying would kill me. Lavinia hands me copies of the old medical records, and I identify them as mine, pointing to the dates and the injury descriptions that match exactly what I'm saying. She asks about the 16 years since I left, and I describe working doubles to keep us fed, managing every detail of Ariana's life alone, never asking him for a single dollar because staying away from him was worth being poor. Then she gets to the 2 weeks and I take a breath before explaining that my daughter told me she wished I would leave. So I gave her space by working extended shifts while still paying all the bills and making sure the house ran. I admit it wasn't perfect parenting, but I was trying to teach her what absence really meant while keeping her physically safe and financially supported. Lavinia nods and sits down, and his lawyer stands up with a smile that makes my stomach hurt. He asks why I abandoned my daughter for 2 weeks, and I correct him that I worked late shifts, not abandoned anyone. He suggests I was punishing Ariana for normal teenage behavior, and I explain I was setting boundaries after months of verbal abuse. He brings up the party where I refused to pick her up, and I stay calm while describing how I told her to call her father, the man she claimed was so much better than me. He tries to make me sound vindictive, but I keep my voice steady and explain that sometimes the best way to teach a lesson is to let reality be the teacher. The cross-examination lasts 20 minutes, and I can feel him trying to twist every answer, but I stick to the facts and refuse to get defensive or emotional. When he finally sits down, I feel wrung out, but still standing, and I catch Ariana's eye in the gallery where she gives me a tiny nod. The judge asks a few clarifying questions about my current work schedule and living situation, writing notes while I answer, and her face gives away nothing about what she's thinking. When she dismisses me, I walk back to the table next to Lavinia and my hands are shaking, so hard I have to sit on them. The judge calls a short break, and a bailiff leads Ariana toward the chamber's door, and I watch my daughter disappear into that private room where I can't protect her or help her tell her story. Lavinia puts her hand on my arm and reminds me that Ariana is strong and prepared, but the next 20 minutes feel like 20 hours while I sit in the courtroom staring at the closed door. Other cases are called and resolved while we wait. People's lives decided in 5-minute hearings about unpaid tickets and missed court dates. Finally, the chamber's door opens, and Ariana walks out with red eyes and a tissue clutched in her hand, but her shoulders are back and her chin is up. She slides into the seat next to me and whispers that she told the judge everything, about the party and the phone call, and how her dad hung up on her when she was hiding from the police. She says the judge asked really specific questions about whether she felt safe with me, and whether she wanted to see her father alone, and she answered honestly about wanting supervised visits only. I squeeze her hand and she squeezes back, and Lavinia leans over to tell us quietly that in-chambers testimony from teenagers carries real weight because judges can see if they're being coached or speaking their own truth. The judge returns to the bench and calls our case again, and I hold my breath while she shuffles through papers. The clerk hands the judge a stack of documents, and I recognize our evidence binder, the school counselor's letter on top with the CPS report underneath. The judge reads through each page slowly, making notes in the margins, and I can see her eyebrows raise slightly when she gets to the visitation center report. Lavinia stands and walks the judge through the key points, explaining that every professional who's observed this family sees the same pattern of a protective mother and a manipulative father. She points out that the school counselor noted Ariana's anxiety around contact with her father, that CPS found no evidence of neglect despite the complaint, and that the supervised visit ended early because Ariana used her safety word after her father spent the whole time trying to turn her against me. The judge nods and makes more notes, then looks directly at my ex and asks his lawyer if he has any evidence to contradict the pattern documented across multiple sources. His lawyer stammers something about parental alienation, and the judge cuts him off, stating that a child's fear is not alienation when it's based on that parent's actual behavior. She reviews the doorbell camera footage showing him violating the temporary restraining order and the text messages where he threatened to take custody. The weight of all this documentation sitting on the judge's bench feels like validation, like maybe the system actually works sometimes when you document everything and tell the truth consistently. The judge announces she needs 15 minutes to review everything, and the bailiff calls a recess, and we file out into the hallway where I pace back and forth, while Lavinia checks her phone like this is just another Thursday. Ariana sits on a bench picking at her fingernails, and I can see her leg bouncing with nervous energy. I try to read Lavinia's face for clues about how it's going, but she just smiles and says the evidence speaks for itself. The 15 minutes stretch into 20 and then 25, and I start to panic that the delay means bad news. Finally, the bailiff opens the door and calls us back in, and I grab Ariana's hand as we walk to our table. The judge looks at both sides and begins reading from her notes, stating that she's reviewed all the evidence and testimony carefully. She says the pattern of behavior demonstrated by the father shows concerning manipulation and intimidation tactics, and that the mother's actions during the 2-week period, while imperfect, do not constitute abandonment or neglect. She makes the restraining order permanent, prohibiting him from coming within 500 feet of me or contacting me directly for any reason. Then she addresses visitation and states that all contact with the minor child will remain supervised at the father's expense, with no consideration for expanded contact until he completes a minimum of 6 months of anger management classes with proof of attendance. She notes that Ariana's clearly expressed preference for supervised contact only is given significant weight given her age and maturity. I feel my legs go weak and I have to grab the table to stay standing, and Lavinia's hand on my shoulder is the only thing keeping me grounded. The judge continues reading and orders immediate child support enforcement with wage garnishment through the state system, calculating arrears based on 16 years of non-payment at the state guidelines. She sets the monthly amount and warns my ex that failure to pay will result in contempt charges and possible jail time, and that his tax refunds will be intercepted until the arrears are paid in full. Lavinia squeezes my shoulder and I can barely process what I'm hearing. that money might actually come regularly instead of me scraping by on my salary alone. The judge explains that the state will handle collection automatically so I won't have to chase him for payments, and that the arrears will accrue interest if he tries to avoid paying. She sets a review hearing for 6 months out to assess his progress with anger management and his payment compliance. The financial relief hits me almost as hard as the safety ruling, because poverty has been grinding me down for 16 years, and now maybe I can afford to fix the car and buy Ariana new shoes without choosing between them. The judge asks if there are any questions, and his lawyer starts to object, but the judge cuts him off, stating that her ruling is based on clear and convincing evidence, and that the father's own behavior during this proceeding has only reinforced her concerns. She bangs her gavel and we're dismissed, and I stand there trying to remember how to breathe. Lavinia herds us toward the side exit because she can see his lawyer trying to approach us in the main hallway, and she blocks them with her body while telling them firmly that we have nothing to discuss. We push through the heavy door into the parking lot, and I see him standing by his truck, and for the first time he looks small instead of terrifying. The judge's ruling has stripped away the power he held over me for so long, reduced him to just a man who has to follow court orders like everyone else. Officer Colombo appears from somewhere and walks with us to our car, his presence making me feel protected in a way I never expected. He congratulates us on the outcome and reminds us to call immediately if the ex violates any part of the order, and he gives Ariana his card too in case she ever needs help. We get in the car, and I lock the doors, and Ariana starts crying with relief, and I join her, both of us sobbing in the parking lot, while Lavinia stands guard outside until we're ready to drive away. The ride home is quiet except for occasional sniffles, and when we pull into our driveway, the house looks different somehow. Safer. Like it's really ours now instead of just a place we're hiding. Monday morning, I request a meeting with my supervisor and sit in her cramped office trying to figure out how to explain everything without crying. She closes the door, and I tell her the basics about the custody case and the abuse, and why I've been so unreliable lately, leaving out the worst details but giving her enough to understand. She listens without interrupting, and when I finish, she surprises me by apologizing for being frustrated without knowing what I was dealing with. She pulls up the schedule on her computer and offers me consistent 8-hour shifts instead of the doubles I've been working, explaining that she'd rather have me present and reliable than burned out and disappearing. The new schedule means less money, but it also means I'll be home for dinner and bedtime. And I realize I've been so focused on survival that I forgot what normal life looks like. She asks if I need any accommodations under FMLA for court dates or therapy appointments, and I almost cry at her kindness, at finally having a boss who treats me like a human instead of just a warm body to fill shifts. We shake hands, and I leave her office feeling lighter than I have in months, like maybe I can build a real life instead of just surviving day to day. That evening, Ariana and I sit on the couch with her laptop open between us, and we start going through her social media accounts one by one. She shows me her Instagram follower list, and we block anyone connected to her father or his family, anyone who might report back to him about our lives. We unfollow the party friends who encouraged her rebellion and encouraged her to sneak out, the ones who thought rules were oppression instead of protection. She changes all her privacy settings to maximum, and we go through her posts deleting anything that shows our address or her school or places we go regularly. I watch her voluntarily remove photos she used to love because they compromise our safety, and I'm grateful she understands why this matters. We compromise on her keeping Instagram, but making it private with me having the password, and she agrees without argument that it's worth losing some freedom to keep us both protected. She shows me how to check her DMs, and we set up a rule that she'll show me any messages from unknown accounts before responding. The whole process takes 2 hours, and when we're done, her social media presence is locked down tight, and she admits it feels safer this way, even though it means fewer likes and followers. The community mental health clinic calls Tuesday with an opening for joint counseling on a sliding scale based on my income, and I grab the appointment before they can give it to someone else. Thursday evening, we drive to the clinic in a strip mall next to a dollar store, and the waiting room smells like old coffee and anxiety. The therapist is younger than I expected with kind eyes and a notebook she holds loosely in her lap. She asks us each to describe what brought us here, and Ariana goes first, explaining about pushing me away and learning the hard way that freedom without safety is just danger. I describe the fight in the kitchen and the 2 weeks of distance and how we almost lost each other completely. The therapist asks Ariana how she felt when I pulled back, and my daughter's answer breaks my heart, describing the terror of realizing I might actually leave like her father did. I explain how her words about wishing I would leave cut deeper than she knew, hitting every wound I've carried from her father's abandonment. We both cry and apologize, and the therapist guides us through talking about our mistakes without attacking each other. She gives us homework about communication and checking in daily, and she schedules us for weekly sessions. Walking out, I feel raw but hopeful. Like maybe we can build something more honest than what we had before. 2 weeks after the hearing, I show up at Ariana's volleyball game for the first time since everything exploded, and I find a spot in the bleachers where I can see the whole court. She's warming up with her team and hasn't seen me yet, and I watch her serve and spike with a fierce focus I recognize from myself. Then she spots me in the stands and her whole face transforms, lighting up with a smile so big it makes my chest hurt. She waves and I wave back, and I see her tell her teammates something before the game starts. The match is close and loud, and I scream myself hoarse, cheering for every point, and when Ariana makes the winning spike, the whole gym erupts. After the game, she runs over, still sweaty and breathing hard, and she hugs me without caring that she's gross. Her teammates crowd around asking if I'm her mom, and she introduces me proudly, and I shake hands with girls who've only heard about me through Ariana's complaints. We leave the gym together, and I ask if she wants to celebrate, and her face lights up again when I suggest pizza, even though I know it'll stretch this week's budget thin. We go to the cheap place with the red booths and order a large pepperoni with breadsticks, and for 2 hours we're just a normal mother and daughter laughing and talking about everything except court and custody and danger. She tells me about her classes and her friends, and a boy she maybe likes, and I tell her about the funny customer at work and my coworkers' terrible jokes. We split the last breadstick, and I realize this is what I've been fighting for. These ordinary moments where we get to just be together without fear hanging over us. The bill comes and I pay it without wincing, and we drive home full and happy, and I remember what it feels like to not be in survival mode every single second. 3 weeks after the pizza celebration, we're back at the visitation center for the second supervised visit, and this time Ariana walks in with her shoulders back instead of hunched forward. Caleb nods at us from his corner desk, and she disappears through the door marked visitation room. While I take my usual plastic chair in the lobby. Through the observation window, I watch her sit across from her dad with her hands folded on the table and her face calm like our therapist taught her. He leans forward with that concerned father voice I remember from before everything got bad and starts asking about school and volleyball and whether I'm still working those crazy hours. She answers with yes or no, nothing more, her voice flat and steady. He shifts tactics and mentions how tired I must be, how maybe she'd be better off with him now that he's got his life together, how he has a nice apartment and she could have her own room. She says no thank you without emotion, and I see him frown because the manipulation isn't landing the way it used to. He tries again, bringing up the 2 weeks I worked late and asking if she felt abandoned, if she was scared, if she thinks I really care about her well-being. Ariana looks at him for a long moment and says her mom never abandoned her, and that's all she has to say about it. The hour crawls by with him trying different angles, and her responding with the same flat yes or no answers, never taking the bait, never giving him ammunition. When Caleb finally says time's up, she stands immediately and walks out without looking back. In the car, she stares out the window for 5 minutes before telling me it was exhausting, but she feels stronger for surviving it, like she proved to herself that he can't control her anymore. I reach over and squeeze her hand and tell her she never has to go back if she doesn't want to, that the court order protects her right to refuse visits. She nods and keeps staring out the window, and I drive us home in silence that feels peaceful instead of heavy. The victim assistance grant approval letter arrives in early December on a Tuesday afternoon when I'm between shifts. I open it standing in the kitchen, still wearing my work uniform, and the first line makes my hands shake. Approved for $3,200 to reimburse security system costs and cover 3 months of therapy copays. I read it 3 times to make sure it's real before I start crying right there by the sink. The state is saying we matter, that our safety is worth investing in, that we're not just another case file to be processed and forgotten. I forward the letter to Lavinia immediately with a thank you message because she's the one who helped me navigate the application process. She replies within minutes saying she's proud of us and to let her know if we need help accessing the funds. I sit down at the kitchen table and read the letter again, doing math in my head about what this money means. The security upgrades are paid for retroactively, so that's money back in our account. 3 months of therapy copays means we can keep going to our joint sessions without me choosing between mental health and groceries. And there's enough left over that I can buy Ariana a real Christmas present this year. Not just socks and practical things like I've done every year since the divorce. Maybe that volleyball equipment she's been wanting, or the art supplies she mentioned last month. The possibility of giving her something she actually wants instead of just needs feels like a miracle I don't deserve. Sunday dinner becomes our new tradition, and this week when I'm pulling out ingredients for spaghetti, Ariana opens the drawer where I keep the aprons. She holds up the faded blue one with the ridiculous sunflower pattern, the one she used to mock me for wearing, the one she was wearing that night I found her on the kitchen floor. She asks quietly if we can keep using this one for our Sunday cooking. I feel my throat get tight and just nod because I don't trust my voice. She ties it on with a shy smile and admits it makes her feel safe and connected to our home in a way she didn't understand before. I realize in that moment that the apron represents everything she almost lost when she pushed me away. All the ordinary moments of cooking and cleaning and being together that she took for granted until they were gone. We make spaghetti and garlic bread while music plays from her phone. Something pop and upbeat that I don't recognize. She shows me how to chop garlic the way her home economics teacher taught her. And I pretend I don't already know, because watching her teach me something makes her so happy. We dance badly while the pasta boils, bumping into each other in our small kitchen, and laughing when I almost knock over the sauce. The kitchen that witnessed our worst fight, where she told me she wished I would leave, becomes the place where we rebuild our relationship one meal at a time. After dinner, I pull out a blank piece of paper and suggest we write out our new family rules together. Not the desperate crisis boundaries from before, but sustainable guidelines we can actually live with. Ariana sits across from me at the table and we start listing things. Communication about plans and whereabouts. Reasonable curfews on the school nights and weekends. Social media privacy settings and what's safe to post. How we handle disagreements without destroying each other. She suggests we add rules about checking in when we're upset instead of letting things build up, and I write that down. I add a rule about asking for help when we need it, and she nods. Then she says quietly that we should add a rule about me not working more than 10 hours a day, unless it's an emergency. I look up surprised and she's staring at the paper instead of me. She says she doesn't want me to burn out trying to provide for us, that she'd rather have less stuff and more time with me. I have to blink back tears because my daughter is thinking about my well-being too, not just her own freedom. We both sign the document at the bottom and I put it on the fridge with a magnet. It feels less like a punishment and more like a promise that we're choosing to stay connected even when it's hard. The next evening, we pull out our safety plan one more time to update it now that things have stabilized. We confirm that all his numbers stay blocked on both our phones, and I show Ariana how to check her block list to make sure he hasn't found new ways to contact her. We review our code words for different emergency situations, the ones we practiced months ago that we haven't needed to use. We go through our emergency contact list and make sure all the numbers are still current. I text Officer Colombo and ask if we can schedule quarterly check-ins just to maintain the relationship, and he responds within an hour saying he'll put us on his calendar. Ariana suggests we also add our neighbor's number to the emergency list since she's home during the day, and I write that down. The plan feels less urgent now, less like we're constantly bracing for attack, but it's still necessary. Safety isn't something you achieve once and forget about. It's ongoing maintenance, like changing smoke detector batteries or checking door locks. We practice the plan one more time, walking through what we'd do if he showed up at the house or at Ariana's school or tried to contact her through someone else. Then we file it away in the kitchen drawer where we keep important papers, hoping we never need it, but confident we could execute it if we had to. I sit down to write this final update not because the story is over, but because I need to be honest about where we are now. We're safer than we were 3 months ago when he showed up in his truck outside our house. The restraining order is in place and enforced, and he hasn't violated it in weeks. The child support is coming through automatically every month through wage garnishment, and it actually helps with bills. Ariana has tools to protect herself that I never had at her age, therapy and boundaries, and the knowledge that she can refuse contact with someone who hurts her. We're more connected now than we were before everything exploded, talking honestly about hard things instead of pretending everything is fine. We still have hard days when the money gets tight or when Ariana has nightmares about her dad showing up at the school. I still worry about whether he'll violate the order, whether the court will eventually pressure us into unsupervised visits, whether I'm doing enough to keep us safe. But we're building a life where safety and love coexist instead of competing with each other. My daughter knows now that I stayed when her father left, that I've been here every single day for 14 years, working and fighting and protecting her even when she couldn't see it. She knows that staying isn't weakness or desperation, it's the hardest kind of strength. And that's not nothing. That's everything.